Did Dr. Ambedkar think of embracing Sikhism? It has been matter of intense debate whether Dr. Bhim Rao Ambedkar, the father of the Indian Constitution, wanted to embrace the Sikh faith. The prevalent notion among left liberal circles is that the Sikh leadership thwarted his efforts to lead the en-masse conversion of the downtrodden to the Sikh religion. Welcome to the first ever show of the Amritsar Talks. This is Pipal, and let's have a detailed tour of events those took place between 1935 to 37. At the Bombay Presidency Depressed Classes Conference held in Yola on October 13, 1935, Dr. BR Ambedkar, in his presidential address, recounted the treatment meted out by the caste Hindus to the depressed classes. He declared that after deeply pondering over a way out, he had come to the conclusion that the best way was a complete severance from the Hindu fold. We shall cease our fight for equality where we have been denied it, because we have the misfortune to call ourselves Hindus. We are treated thus. If we were members of another faith, none dared to treat us so. Dr. Ambedkar, in asking them to embrace another faith, left the choice to individuals, saying, "Choose any religion which gives you equality of status and treatment." He concluded, "We shall repair our mistakes now. I had the misfortune of being born with the stigma of an untouchable, but it is not my fault, and I will not die a Hindu, for this is in my power." Quickly reacting to this announcement, a delegation of the Bombay Hindu Sabha called on Dr. Ambedkar on the October 25, 1935, and secured a promise from him that he would confer with the leaders of the Hindu Mahasabha and other Hindu organizations before taking a final decision. M.K. Gandhi, in a signed article in the Harijan newspaper on October 26, 1935, wrote, "Let not Dr. Ambedkar's just wrath deject the reformer." As a follow-up to their meeting with Dr. Ambedkar in October 1935, Dr. Andy Savarkar, V.D. Savarkar's younger brother, arranged a meeting between Dr. Ambedkar and Musurkar Maharaj. However, the Hindu Mahasabha's office secretary Ganpat Rai wrote to Mr. Jaikar on November 21, 1935, that the members of our working committee do not take Dr. Ambedkar very seriously. Continuing in the same vein, Raja Narendranath, senior Punjabi Hindu Mahasabha leader, said that the conversion move would deprive Ambedkar's followers of the concession which as depressed classes they had obtained by the Pune Pact. A man of Ambedkar's intelligence must understand this. I therefore think that this threat of the change of religion is mere bluff. Santram, secretary of the Jatpat Todak Mandal Lahore, sent an invitation letter to Dr. Ambedkar on December 12, 1935, requesting him to preside over Mandal's annual conference to be held during the Easter next year. However, the conference was subsequently postponed to the middle of May 1936. As we shall see later, the conference was put off indefinitely after the lengthy correspondence between the Mandal and Dr. Ambedkar. Meanwhile, in his address at the 17th session of Hindu Mahasabha held in Pune on December 29, 1935, Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya hit out at Dr. Ambedkar's threat to leave Hinduism. "We are meeting today under the shadow of great menace." Continuing, he said the logic of the argument for a change of faith was as much as saying, "Since we do not get the equality and freedom in India, let us leave this country and be citizen of the alien country." Sardar Narayan Singh, the manager of Gurdwara Nankana Sahib, travelled to Bombay with a 9-member delegation to hold on one-to-one talks with Dr. Ambedkar and his followers. The delegation included Sant Teja Singh, Gyani Inder Singh, and the Ragi Jatha of Bhai Sumant Singh. Upon reaching Bombay, the delegation first printed a set of Gurmat tracts in English and Marathi. The delegation then proceeded to Pune to participate in a Mahar conference on January 11th and 12th, 1936. Pune at that time was a stronghold of Brahminical hegemony. With the cooperation of a Singh Sabha of Bombay and Pune, they first set up the Gurukul Langar. They received a positive response in the preparation and the distribution of the Langar from the Mahar activists. This, along with the distribution of Gurmat tracts, left a very positive impression on the conference attendees. The delegation was also allowed to perform Kirtan and give speeches from their stage. The delegation also held talks with Dr. Ambedkar, who was in charge of the conference. The delegation wound up its 2 months tour after doing a survey of Sachkhand Shri Hajur Sahib, Nagpur and Agra on its way back to Nankana Sahib, Punjab. They submitted their report to Nankana Sahib Gurdwara Committee, which accepted it in its meeting held on 25th of February 1936. Meanwhile, the Hindu Mahasabha took the rapprochement of Dr. Ambedkar with Sikhs seriously and started talks with him. Reacting to the developments, Hindu Mahasabha leader Dr. B.S. Munje noted in his diary, "I'm certain he will not join Sikhism. If he gives up Hinduism, he will not join any other ism but will go straight into Islam." He added, "Feeding him means feeding a serpent milk." MK Gandhi objected to Ambedkar's conversion threats in the Harijan dated March 21, 1936, saying Ambedkar had thrown a bombshell in the midst of Hindu society. The Shiromani Committee en-masse started preparations for organizing an All India Sikh Prachar Conference in April 1936 to boost the efforts to attract the depressed classes to the Sikh fold. The committee also extended an invitation to Dr. Ambedkar to participate in the conference. On April 11, 1936, a grand procession started from Amritsar railway station, which included representatives from the Sikh populated areas, the office bearers of the Shiromani Committee, and the leaders of Shiromani Akali Dal. Sardar Vasakha Singh, Sardar Hukum Singh Session Judge, Bhai Fateh Singh, former head Granthi of Shri Darbar Sahib, Pratap Singh, President Shiromani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee, and Sir Jalaluddin were seated in beautifully decorated horse carriages. On April 12, 1936, the proceedings began at noon on Darbar Sahib premises. Advocate Harnam Singh, Vice President of Shiromani Committee, welcomed the delegates who had come from all parts of the subcontinent. He also read out the letters sent by delegates and well-wishers who had failed to attend the conference. These included the letters and messages sent by Sardar Amar Singh, Honorary Secretary of Singh Sabha Shillong, Professor Gurmukh Singh, Hindu University Banaras, Sardar Kartar Singh Advocate Kamelpur, Pandit Nishchal Singh, Sardar Bahadur Pai Khan Singh Nabha, Bhuta Singh President Committee Jamshedpur, His Holiness Jagat Guru Shankaracharya Karveer Peeth Panchwati Nasik, Jugal Kishore Birla, Sardar Anup Singh Secretary of Shri Guru Singh Sabha Hoti, President of Gurdwara Committee Mirpur Khas Sindh, Ganesh Damodar Savarkar, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, and Thakur Kunwar Raj Kumar Singh of Rai Bareli State. The Darbar Sahib's premises were chock-a-block with the Sikh Sangat and the delegates who had reached Amritsar, especially for the conference. The prominent Sikh personalities seated on the dais included Sant Vasakha Singh, Sir Sundar Singh Majithia, Bhai Arjan Singh Bagadia, Professor Jodh Singh, Professor Narayan Singh, Vice Principal Khalsa College Amritsar, Sardar Mangal Singh MLA, Sardar Ujjal Singh MLC, Sardar Bahadur Dr. Kartar Singh, Sardar Mangal Singh Kotshera MLC, Sardar Tarlochan Singh President Darbar Sahib Committee, Sardar Bahadur Mehtab Singh, Jathedar Teja Singh Puchar, and many others. Dr. Ambedkar was also present at Shri Akal Takht Sahib. Sardar Vasakha Singh gave the presidential address. Professor Jodh Singh, Sardar Amar Singh from Nagpur, Sardar Jai Singh, and Rasik Lal Biswas from Bengal also addressed the congregation. Thereafter, Dr. Ambedkar gave his speech. Repeating his stand, voiced on 13th of October 1935, Dr. Ambedkar said,
"Although there is no official decision on the part of the depressed classes, two things are certain at any rate. One thing certain for me, that I have made up my mind that I will go away from the Hindu fold. My decision is firm. There are many people who will have their say in regard to the depressed classes, but this much is certain, that when the day comes for them to decide which religion to embrace, Sikhism will demand the best of our attention. I say that deliberately. It is not a mere sentiment that I am uttering. I am not here to please you. It is because of two reasons that Sikhism will demand our best consideration. Firstly, that Sikhism can be a spiritual home of any people who want peace with honor. The Guru Granth Sahib can be a good spiritual guide for myself, and I hope what is good for me may be considered good for the rest of my brethren. We are disgusted with the Hindus and religious inequality of Hindus. The Guru Granth Sahib depicts casteless society."
On 13th April 1936, the third and last day of All India Prachar Conference, the All India Sikh Mission was formed to spread the Guru's message among the depressed classes and the downtrodden. The mission was given the responsibility to carry forward talks with Dr. Ambedkar. Master Tara Singh was appointed General Secretary, Master Sujan Singh Sarhali as Secretary, and Sardar Kair Singh, Headmaster Khalsa High School, was appointed as the President of the Sikh Mission. After this, a group of 14 untouchable young men from Maharashtra was sent by Dr. Ambedkar to Amritsar to learn about the Sikh religion. This week also brought to fore the internal differences between the Jat-Pat Todak Mandal over the proposed presidential address of Dr. Ambedkar for its annual conference. Punjabi Hindu leaders including Bhai Parmanand, Sir Gokul Chandrang, Rajendra Nath, and Mahatma Hansraj disassociated themselves from the conference, citing the references to the Vedas and abolition of caste system in Dr. Ambedkar's address. The Mandal sent letter to Dr. Ambedkar on April 22, 1936, informing him that the conference had been postponed sine die. Rejecting the Mandal's claims and objections to his proposed address, Dr. Ambedkar shot off a letter on April 27, 1936, asking them to announce that the conference had been cancelled.
I feel sure that the views expressed in my address have little to do with the decision of your committee. I have reasons to believe that my presence at the Sikh Prachar conference held at Amritsar has had a good deal to do with the decision of the committee. Nothing else can satisfactorily explain the sudden volte-face shown by the committee between the 14th and the 22nd of April. I must not, however, prolong this controversy and must request you to announce immediately that the session of the conference, which was to meet under my presidentship, is cancelled. All the grace has by now run out, and I shall not accept my address as it is in toto. I thank you for your appreciation of pains I have taken in the preparation of the address. I certainly have profited by the labor if no one else does. My only regret is that I was put to such hard labor at a time when my health was not equal to the strain it has caused.
Seth Walchand Hirachand persuaded Dr. Ambedkar to hold talks with M.K. Gandhi about the depressed classes' threat to leave Hinduism. The two leaders held discussions at Vodda and Sevagram in April 1936. Meanwhile, Dr. Ambedkar requested the Sikh leaders to start an educational institution for the upliftment of the depressed classes and also sought help in setting up a printing press in Bombay. The Sikh mission, in collaboration with Singh Sabha Bombay, purchased land worth at 1,79,673 rupees in Matunga colony for starting the degree college. A sum of rate 75,000 was spent on buying land in Naigam plots for setting up the Janta Press. Sardar Kher Singh gave 5,000 rupees to Dr. Ambedkar, who planned to visit Germany for preparing the final design of the degree college. Sardar Kher Singh and engineer Baba Pola Singh got the design approved by the corporation and started the construction work. Reacting to the developments, B.S. Munje noted in his diary on June 7, 1936, "Any money spent on the untouchables is like feeding a garden serpent with milk. We must leave the untouchables most severely to themselves." Continuing in the same vein, he added, "The most vital point on which there must be a concentration of all energy, money, and other resources is the militarization of the caste Hindus, so that they must be able to punish both those who change their Hindu faith and also who bring about such change of the faith." However, the section of the Hindu Sabha, including Dr. Andy Savarkar, Kotikoti, and J.K. Bella, prevailed under Munje, who reached Bombay on 18th June 1936 to hold talks with Dr. Ambedkar. After talks stretching over 3 days at Rajgriha, Munje promised Dr. Ambedkar that the untouchables would continue to reap the benefits of the Pune Pact if they convert to Sikhism. The Hindu Mahasabha would pressure the British government to include the Neo-Sikhs in the list of scheduled castes. In return, Dr. Ambedkar expressed his willingness to help the Hindu Mahasabha in countering the conversion campaign of Christians and Muslims and in propagating Hindu culture. Munje wrote in his diary on June 19 and 20, 1936, "So elated was Ambedkar that he insisted on me joining him for celebratory feast. The duo agreed to keep the pact secret till Munje got it approved from the Hindu Mahasabha and Ambedkar took the final decision on the issue." Munje had earlier signed a pact with M.C. Raja, a Dalit leader from South India, in February 1932 on the issue of reserved seats and joint electorates in Delhi. Munje wrote a confidential letter to Raja on June 30, 1936, sharing the details of his talks with Dr. Ambedkar. Raja, in return, passed on the information to M.K. Gandhi. A delegation of senior Sikh leaders, including Sir Jogendra Singh, Sardar Ujjal Singh, Sir Sundar Singh Majithia, and Sardar Gurmukh Singh Musafir, secretary of the Shromani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee, met Munje to expedite the Mahasabha's endorsement of the pact. UP Congress leader Govind Vallabh Pant came out strongly against the Ambedkar-Munje formula. They cannot have it both ways. Either they are Hindus and enjoy the privileges of the Pune Pact, or they cease to be Hindus and forfeit these privileges. M.K. Gandhi wrote back to Raja on 26 July 1936, endorsing his views on pact. "I do not at all understand Dr. Munje or Dr. Ambedkar's position. For me, the removal of untouchability stands on footing all its own. It is to me a deeply religious question. The very existence of our religion depends on its voluntary removal by Swarna Hindu in the spirit of repentance. It can never be a question of barter to me, and I'm glad you take nearly the same position that I do." Raja also shared the details of his correspondence with Munje with the press. According to Bombay Chronicle dated 8th August 1936, Raja opposed the pact saying,
One can understand your concern if, as president of the Hindu Mahasabha, you place the spiritual welfare of the depressed classes first and foremost, and thought of the social and economic welfare next, and lastly, thought of them as a political factor. Your solicitude for the place of the depressed classes in the political scheme not only exposes the interesting nature of your concern for these classes, but is like placing the cart before the horse. One would expect you as a president of the Hindu Mahasabha to ameliorate the social condition of the depressed classes by removing civic and social disabilities of these classes. not to speak of securing for them the right of worship in Hindu temples on an equal footing with other worshippers, and to further the Harijan movement started by Gandhiji all over the country. What is it that you are doing? You are dissecting the depressed classes and affiliating them religiously to the Sikhs while retaining them politically as Hindus.
Madan Mohan Malviya sent a telegram to Raja on July 30, 1936, thanking him for sharing his correspondence with Munje and agreeing with his views on the Munje-Ambedkar Pact. In a bid to overcome the opposition to his pact with Dr. Ambedkar, Dr. B.S. Munje held consultations with Mr. C. Vijay Gravachari, Babu Ram Manan Chatterjee, Raja Narendra Nath, Seth Jugal Kishore Birla, Mr. Gavai, Mr. Jaikar, and others who approved of the idea and modified the first draft after having personal discussions with M. M. Malviya in Shimla. Dr. Munje released the revised draft to the press, which was published in the Times of India on August 12, 1936.
If Dr. Ambedkar were to announce his decision that he and his followers were prepared to enter into the Sikh Panth and thereby remain within the wider circle of the Hindu Dharma in preference to Islam and Christianity, and that he shall honestly and sincerely cooperate with the Hindus and the Sikhs in propagating their culture and counteracting the proselytizing movements for the drawing in of the depressed classes into the Mohammedan and the Christian folds, the Hindu Mahasabha will be prepared in view of their having agreed to remain within the Hindu culture and the wider circle of the Hindu Dharma, to make an announcement that it has no objection to Dr. Ambedkar and his followers becoming Sikh, to such new Sikhs remaining in the list of the scheduled castes, and no objection to the full enjoyment by the new Sikhs of all the political rights of the Pune Pact by free competition between such new Sikhs and the remaining non-Sikh members of the depressed classes as have been provided for them under the Pune Pact.
In his presidential address to the 18th session of All India Hindu Mahasabha held at Lahore on October 21, 1936, Dr. Kotikoti said,
I now come to the most pertinent question which is hanging before the Hindu community, and that is, should the untouchables change over to Sikhism? I must empathetically say that those who wish to should be allowed to join that sect. It is not insisted that all untouchables should go over in a body and join Sikhism. The sanction to embrace Sikhism means that those untouchables who cannot tolerate anymore the humiliating conditions under which they have to live should be allowed to change to improve their condition by becoming members of community which they feel gives them what they want. I cannot help noting here with regret that one of the reasons given by Rao Bahadur Raja in rejecting Ambedkar-Munje formula, namely that it would antagonize the Muslims, came to me as an unpleasant surprise. Does it not reveal pusillanimous attitude? Does it not show that all the tall talk about no barter of religion is a mere eyewash, and that what is really at the bottom of the opposition to the formula is the fear of Muslims? Can any words be sufficient to condemn such poltronery?
On the second day of the session on October 22, 1936, the Sanatanists protested against certain expressions in Dr. Kotikoti's address relating to the Harijans and their suggested conversion to Sikhism. Rai Bahadur Ram Saran Das, chairman of reception committee, Rai Bahadur Binda Saran and Diwan Kishan Kishore announced their withdrawal from further sittings of the conference. Hence, the reception committee didn't put Munje-Ambedkar Pact for voting. Dr. Ambedkar left for England on 11th of November 1936 and returned back in January-mid 1937. As the Shiromani Gurdwara Committee was facing shortage of funds, it assigned the task of overseeing the construction work of Khalsa College Bombay to Nankana Sahib Committee. Sardar Narayan Singh, manager of Nankana Sahib, reached Bombay with Babu Atma Singh on March 22, 1937. Dr. Ambedkar used to visit the construction site every alternative day. The construction of the college was done without a break in 2 labor shifts. Sardar Narayan Singh was assigned by the engineer Santokh Singh, Sardar Gurdev Singh Sethi, president of Singh Sabha Bombay, Sardar Atma Singh and other prominent Sikhs. Dr. Ambedkar was interested in starting the admission process in the ensuing academic year. The Bombay University had earmarked the June 20th-July 10 period for admissions. Bhai Narayan Singh's group put in all efforts to finish the construction work, the furnishing of the science laboratories and library within the limited time slot. While all these hectic efforts were on, Dr. Ambedkar, along with his followers, suddenly went silent on his proposed conversion to Sikhism. Perturbed with this development, a delegation of prominent Sikh leaders from Punjab comprising Master Sujan Singh, General Secretary of All India Sikh Mission, Jahidar Teja Singh, President Gurdwara Committee Nankana Sahib, Baba Harkrishan Singh, Khalsa College Amritsar, Principal Kashmira Singh and Sardar Isha Singh Mujail reached Bombay on May 22, 1937. Dr. Ambedkar had left Bombay a few days before this delegation came to meet him. The delegation decided to travel to Janjira, 60 miles away from Bombay, to meet Dr. Ambedkar. They hired a streamer, and this group of 7 persons, including Pai Narayan Singh and Gurdit Singh Sethi, reached Janjira. Dr. Ambedkar was surprised to see them. The Sikh delegation held talks with Dr. Ambedkar on that day and the following day. Dr. Ambedkar blamed Hindu leaders for giving false assurances and alluring away other depressed class leaders, and they had decided to remain within the Hindu fold. He expressed his helplessness at the situation, saying that even if he turned a Sikh, only a handful of his followers would follow suit. The Sikh delegation returned to Bombay the same evening.